Hello, everybody. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to give a little bit of a warning that there were some audio issues on my end, not on Will's. Will's fine. So there are going to be some clips of the episode that are taken from the stream recording, the stream archive that we use. It may not be perfect. You might not notice it at all, but just in case it sounds a little bit weird in a couple different little tiny sections of maybe like 10, 20 seconds, that's why it's happening. Thanks for understanding, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone, and good morning and good night. Welcome to our weekly podcast where we're just two folks on opposite ends of the world, and we like to talk about what's going on. I mean, generally, it's a lot of gaming news, some media, but sometimes we talk about, career paths and other experiences we've both had. Obviously, both of us still learning quite a bit. My name is William Cho, also known as Chobra, and also we have Matt Demers on the other end. How you doing,
Hello.
Matt?
Hi. It's been, I've been okay. I've been having a very, I don't want to say awkward week, but one of those kind of just emotionally draining weeks where it isn't even anything in particular. You just kind of hit a weird funk, and it's very difficult to get out of. So I went for a walk yesterday and just tried to avoid my usual way of coping, which is eating. So I'm trying to build some new habits and trying to figure all that stuff out. But I did a sleep study on Friday to Saturday.
Oh yeah,
which was
I've never been to one.
It's very weird. It was very weird. Essentially, I've been dealing with sleep issues, not necessarily hardcore insomnia or anything like that, but mostly just not feeling very awake. And I've been dealing with that since what I feel is university, and that was 10 years ago. So after leaving EG, I actually really took that into really got serious about that and was okay, let's see if we can fix that. And because of COVID and whatever, I was supposed to do this back in April, and that got switched to May, and then that got canceled entirely, and they were we'll call you. So eventually they did call me. They called me on Wednesday and were hey, we have a slot open on Friday. Do you want to come in? And so this involved me going to another city, to a hospital, and sleeping over at in a hospital room. It was just a single bed or whatever. And the weird part was just how much they hook you up to things. They hooked me up to yeah, exactly. They put basically 20 different sensors on you, from your legs to a bunch of places around your skull, and some bands that wrap around pretty much under your armpits and then around your stomach and stuff like that. And then before you actually go to sleep, the guy's on a speaker in their control room kind of thing. There's a video camera and a night vision thing in there too. So that was a little bit sketchy, but eventually you kind of forget about it. But he was just move your eyes back and forth, up and down kind of thing, bend your leg, unflex your legs kind of thing, and just to see if all the sensors were doing what they could. And
okay,
you're literally until he hooks you up into the machine, or the doctor hooks you up into the machine, you basically have it connected to essentially a purse. It's just a giant breadboard is what they're called when you plug in different stuff into it, and then he kind of transfers that to the main machine. And it was just really weird for the first little bit, because you've just got these things glued to your head and then tape over those. And then I don't know, I had that the oxygen thing in your nose, which I've never had before. Those little, it's the tube that wraps around your ears and goes into your nostrils, and it's not there was a steady flow of air or anything like that, but it was just very weird. I was really paranoid that I was going to sleep much differently than I normally do, because either my sleep issues are usually, I'm either really anxious and I can't fall asleep right away, or I am I just never really feel rested. So I was worried that I would sleep too normal And they'd be like, oh no, it's nothing, there's nothing wrong. And then I'd just be like, oh, come on, really? Or I would sleep so erratically compared to normal that it would skew the results. And even talking with my therapist, she was like, you know that they've controlled for that, so like don't worry about it. So like for the good thing is, like, I go there and around like 9:30 or something, I usually go to bed around midnight, and they're like, yeah, you have to let us know if you actually want to go to sleep, because we have to hook you into the machines. And I'm sitting there like, okay. So they hook me up, and I brought my laptop, I brought my phone, and I'm sitting there at like 10:30, and I'm like, okay, let's try this, because he's just like, yeah, people normally just get bored like waiting for like their normal bedtimes, so like don't worry about like asking me early. So I slept from like 11 to, and this is the shitty thing, he wakes me up at like exactly 6 a.m. on the dot. And I'm like, oh, please, why? It's a Saturday. Like, normally I wake up at 8:30 my time because I try to get some time with my coworkers. But, like, 6 is another level of just, I'm tired. I don't want to be awake. I'm like fighting consciousness. And just, like, I just want to roll over and go back to sleep. But, I don't know. I can at least say that I slept, besides the weird hours of the wake up, I slept pretty much the exact way that I normally do, which is I'll wake up like at least once or twice during the night. It takes me like a half hour, an hour to go to sleep. So that's at least a good thing, where the results that I'm going to get back in a couple weeks hopefully are indicative of like the normal sleep patterns. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things where after a while you're just like, I'm going to try every test under the sun, because I've tried vitamin D, I've tried, melatonin, I've tried just like having a really strict sleep schedule, I've tried, getting off the computer an hour before and reading, or like, no caffeine or no food after a certain hour or whatever. And I think that's what, when you're dealing with certain like physical issues, but also a lot of mental health issues, I think that's probably one of the more frustrating things, is that you're in a position where you're not necessarily impatient, but you're just exhausted. You've had to deal with so many like different methods that aren't necessarily working, and you're just like, okay, please let this be the one where I'm like messed up enough that something like pings on the like diagnosis radar and they have a way of fixing it, and maybe this time it'll be the thing that fixes it. So it's kind of a weird like way of looking at it, because like ideally you don't want to be sick, like there's not like a desire.
Well,
to,
I
like,
think it's I don't think it's a matter of like, I think it's, I mean, I think a lot of people experience similar things, but the end result isn't so much that you want to be sick. It's just, certain things aren't as quantifiable, and you're just hoping this time it is, right? Like,
yeah,
whichever
exactly.
method it is quantifying it properly, rather than, because like like I think a lot of people, especially now, as not only, well, mental health in general, but I think sleeping and sleep like cycles and sleeping disorders are becoming more and more talked about, right?
Yeah.
And like more people are realizing like, oh, like even if you never felt like really tired, people are realizing like, oh, like I guess I haven't been sleeping well, right? Because and especially when you're younger, like you get into a cycle for your job or school or whatever, and you think you're fine, and then once you hear about it, or once you really think about it, you're like, oh, I guess I don't sleep well.
You're fine until you're not.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people can probably relate to. Like melatonin used to be like, even like 2 years back, like everyone used to be like, oh, you don't sleep well, like take melatonin. But like these days, more and more people are like, well, melatonin doesn't work for everyone, right? So it's coming about. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to, like you said, it's a well, I hope it pings something. Whereas I guess in the older days, or for anything, when it's not as like researched or it's not as discussed, generally like the old adage of no news is good news is taken. But once there is a bit more like research or thought behind it, you're like, okay, actually I'd rather have news, because clearly it is affecting like whatever, right? So
yeah, sleep is sleep is probably like the one big thing in my life where I just want to fix it, because I don't know, it's a very weird feeling where I feel like I'm working off a sleep debt from like high school, where I used to play like World of Warcraft and in high school, and I would wake up, I would like sleep like 4 hours a night in order to like wake up, go to school, come back, play World of Warcraft, and it was just like I feel like I'm still working off a sleep debt from that. And I know that's kind of drastic, and my body's probably definitely normalized it since then, but it's one of those weird things where I've never like slept very well. And you know, I've always kind of, I've joked about like really liking sleep, because you know, when you get like a good night's sleep, it feels freaking amazing. But I would just like to be able to balance having, okay, this is the sleep I'm having in order, you know, to be, well, it's like eating, right? It's like one of the things we wanted to kind of talk about, this a potential topic, I guess, for this stream, was like comfort food and stuff like that. And I'm kind of going through the same boundaries issue with food, where before it was just like, okay, like why wouldn't I want to eat the things that I like, or why wouldn't I want to sleep as much as I could, because sleeping and eating are great. And then it's like you almost have to remove yourself from the pleasure aspect of it, or the enjoyment aspect of eating and sleeping, because you almost have to look at it more medically. You have to look at it being like, okay, well, the food that I'm eating is only the calories that I'm putting into myself, or the sleep that I'm getting is like a set number of hours, and the idea is to, you know, recharge your body. You know, you have to look at it very clinically, because for someone like me anyway, taking those things to extremes usually means that you're like really fucking up yourself for later. So I don't know. Sleep is, I'm really hoping it works out, mostly just because there's this like mythical thought of, man, wouldn't it be nice to like be awake for like most of the day? You know, wouldn't it be nice to like get a full like 8 hours of work in, instead of like hitting noon and being like, well, my energy's gone. My energy has crashed. This sucks. So yeah, I don't know. That rambled a little bit long, but it's one of those kind of procedures that is very weird, and I don't think a lot of people like either have it on their radar, or like may do something like that in their lifetime. And again, coming out of it, I was just thinking, man, thank God for Canada and paying taxes, because even though our taxes are high, it's like didn't have to pay for it. Didn't have to, that
is pretty sweet.
Didn't have to pay, didn't have a check waiting for me at the end of it. It was all covered. So it was just like, all right, cool. Like that's the thing, especially this year where I've had like more medical procedures and more like specialist stuff to try to figure out some of the more like things that aren't necessarily like going to kill me, but things that I still want to like fix. It's like, I wouldn't probably have had to tackle those things if I had to pay for them straight up. So even though it sucks to like, you know, lose a lot of your paycheck to taxes or whatever, it's like, it's worth it in that regard, where the stress of being like, what can I afford to tackle? It isn't there as much. Like, you know, I don't have insurance through my job. I'm technically like a full-time contractor, and that's esports. You know, that's esports and gaming. Isn't for a lot of these companies, you aren't going to be, especially if you're working remote, you are not going to have health benefits. And even for things like I have to get like a wisdom tooth taken out. Like I got one taken out when I was younger, and then my two bottom ones never came in for whatever reason, but I still have one wisdom tooth that isn't causing me problems, but is still there. And my dentist is like, hey, you should probably get that removed. And it's like, that's $250 I don't have right now, you know? So just like the thought of, well, I could spend the money now and then never have it become a problem, or I can wait till it becomes a problem and then definitely have to pay for it. It's like hearing the horror stories that come out of like the States and stuff like that, in terms of, you know, medical costs bankrupting people and whatever. It's like, I don't know. I didn't mean to turn this into that kind of podcast episode where we talk about the horrors of the American healthcare system, but I mean,
there isn't much to talk about. It's just a nightmare, right?
It's just a nightmare.
Like, there's no way around. Yeah, there's no way around it. I mean, you can analyze it, but I don't think, like, I think even the experts know at this point, and I mean that's why, you know, it's hard to change it, because it's such a mess.
Do
But
you?
yeah, don't worry, you can't like discuss it further because it's
No, exactly.
it's just straight up bad.
Does
that's
Korea
just what it
have
is.
like a socialized healthcare or anything like that? Like I don't know.
No, I mean it's kind of middle. It just generally it's cheaper. Medical
Okay, that's good.
expensive. I mean the joke being that Americans like that don't have residence visas in Korea can fly to Korea, get a surgery, and fly back, and it'll be cheaper
For cheaper,
than being
yeah.
in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's actually true. Like I mean, when I came, and I had to go to the hospital for a couple of things, it was like already cheaper, right? Just the cost of moving here and then going to the hospital. So
Yeah.
for a good example, like when I first worked in Korea, back in 2013, like I was like, I felt like I had a cold. And I was kind of, I thought maybe I was running a fever, so I was like, all right, I'm taking today off. I'm going to go to the hospital. And I used to not, right? Because I just never really did as a kid, but also in the States, again, like we said, like you're just kind of accustomed to like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to the doctors because it's going to cost too much. So I went, and then, they gave me a quick checkup, and they were like, all right, here, we're going to give you some prescription meds. Go down to the pharmacist and you can pick it up, and there's like every hospital basically has a pharmacy
built
attached
in,
to it, or like below it, whereas that's not always the case in the States. So I go in, and I think like the checkup was maybe like $15, $20. The medicine was like $10, right? So in my head I'm like, this is a steal. Like, I'll go to the hospital every day. And then I came back to the office, and they were like, yeah, well, like, was everything okay? Because you don't have insurance. Because, I was we didn't have have like insurance sorted for the foreign contractors. And I was like, yeah, everything was fine. And they were like, how much was it? And I was like, well, the meds were like $10. They're like, but it could have been like $2. And I'm like, okay, listen, let's not get ahead of ourselves, all right? Like,
well, let's not.
In the States, this alone would have cost like $100 to just go get checked up and then get like prescription meds, other than over
generics
the counter.
or whatever.
And I think that's why, like, perhaps compared, not that I know every country, but compared to a lot of other regions, like in the States, over the counter drugs and like generic drugs are like the first thought, right? It's like, oh, not feeling well, let me go get like this brand, right? Whatever I can get without prescription, because otherwise it costs too much.
Yeah.
But now I'm realizing, like, in Korea, like, it's almost weird for me to go and ask for like over the counter drug, like generic drugs, if I'm like not feeling, other than like, I guess, like ibuprofen or something just for like headaches and stuff that you just keep at home for emergencies. Other than that, like, but even that, like, if I go and I'm like, oh, like I have some, for instance, like I have chronic back pain now and then, and in the States it's like, okay, always just keep a bottle of Advil, and even the doctor when I was a kid was like, just take some Advil, but then like in Korea they were like, oh, like even the pharmacists were like, oh, your back's not feeling well, like, well, like how? And they like try to make sure it was like the exact type of pain reliever I would need, and I was like, okay, this is weird, but it was still cheaper, so like that's cool. But the States is just terrible.
Yeah, the whole like for-profit medical complex, so to speak, is just nuts. I don't know. It's like in Canada, well, at least in Ontario, because my health insurance is OHIP. It's Ontario Health Insurance Plan. I think that's the short form or the long form of it. But pretty much it handles everything except for like really crazy specialist stuff and like dental and eye stuff, and even like my medication. Like I'm pretty open about the meds that I'm on for like anti-anxiety and stuff like that. And even those, it's like what you were saying about med prices. I kind of hear the same thing when I like go to a pharmacy. They're always like, oh, like I know, like, what plan do you have? And I'm like, no, I just pay out of pocket. And they always kind of feel a little bit awkward about that. And I'm like, dude, it's like $25 a month for the meds that I need. That's not that bad. I can budget into that. Like, that's not anything crazy.
Yeah,
but I guess for
great.
Yeah, exactly. But for the people that I guess it's for, like you were saying, when people were kind of like shocked that it's even $10 instead of $2 or whatever. It's like they're more conditioned in order to expect those lower prices, and we're almost conditioned the opposite, where we're just like, all right, it didn't financially bankrupt me. Great. I'm fine. You
Right,
know, like
right.
I don't
mean,
know.
it's like housing, right? Like
I was
housing
I
is
was
one
literally
thing,
about to
so-
say I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a country based survival mechanism or if that's a millennial based survival mechanism where housing. I was talking to even my parents this weekend. I went over to their place to have a family barbecue because our province is kind of lax or is has opened up a little bit in terms of COVID stuff, and I was just like, I don't think I'm ever gonna like own a house until I get married. You know, it's like I need dual income in order to afford a house, and even with COVID stuff, housing prices in Canada have just gotten worse. Like it's the one thing that hasn't been affected. It's gotten like even worse, and
Oh.
it's just all right, cool. I guess I'm not gonna like. I'm fine renting. Like I'm.
Well,
You
yeah.
know.
I mean, I meant it more even as like rent, right? Like
Oh
even
yeah,
apartment
yeah.
prices. What I meant was it's what you're conditioned to, right? Like someone from New York and LA is
Oh
going to have a
jeez,
very
yeah.
drastic reaction to an apartment, right? Whereas someone from, anywhere else, right, is going to be like, that's really like, even in Korea when I first came to work here, I got like a studio for what would convert to like, I think at the time it would have been around like 650, 700 USD. I mean, it's small, right? But like everything in Korea is small. But it was a new building. It was really clean. It was super close to work. It was close to like everything I needed. But then everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you are paying like $650 for a studio." And I'm like, "$650 is cheap, right?" In my head, I'm like, $650 to have the comfort that I want. Like, this is a steal." And everyone in Korea is like, "I cannot believe you are paying $650 a month."
Yeah.
So it's just kind of what you're accustomed to, and also just what's around you, right? But and I think that just goes down to preferences, right? So if you live in a region where certain things, like for instance, meds are expensive, then like I said, like a lot of Americans are probably more accustomed to just buying like generic brand meds and kind of dealing with it. And then you prioritize like other places to spend, whereas it might be reversed in Korea or whatnot.
Yeah, and like definitely for Korea, another thing with housing prices is like I don't know. There's always the thought for me where I'm like I could just move to like Manitoba. I could move to like, Saskatchewan or like one of the more like prairie provinces for us, and as long as there's good internet I can work. But then you're thinking, okay, well, that's away from family or that's away from like a decent like airport if I ever need to like travel again for esports or fun or whatever. And I've always brought up the internet prices for Korea and the internet prices for like Japan, where because of the competition and the shared infrastructure and stuff like that, it's like to get a fiber connection in my house, like a thousand is like $125 a month. It's like Canada has absurdly bad internet, has absurdly bad like mobile phone data rates and stuff like that because all of our infrastructure is very monopolized by a couple companies, and since they don't share, it's like the cable is owned by one company, the DSL is owned by another company, and then
Right,
like
right.
so like they have no interest in competing with each other, and they kind of collude in dumb ways of for phone data prices and whatever. But like learning about how like KT and SK Telecom and stuff like that, they just use the same infrastructure, and their only real competition is pricing and in quality of service. It's like, yeah, that's another thing with Canada where you're just like, oh man, yeah, I would move somewhere cheaper if it meant that I would move somewhere cheaper, but then I would have to find good internet, and I would also have to figure out like infrastructure to get back home or to like be with family because I got a big country. Canada is a very big country, and trying to travel from one end to, you can't just travel from one end to the other in a day. It's I don't know. There was my coworkers are all European, and I looked up like a thing of Canada to European countries size comparisons, and I'm actually looking it up right now. If you Google image search Canada versus Europe size, there's an image where it has numerous European countries, and they've just overlaid them into Canada, and you can fit like the entirety of like France and Italy inside just my province. It's like all my coworkers are from the Netherlands, and it's like, yeah, your entire country is about the size of like where I am right now, the drive to Toronto, and then a little bit extra, So if I move to another province, or like Trent Pax is a Dota commentator who lives in the Maritimes. He lives in Nova Scotia, which is like the eastern coast of Canada, and the prices are really cheap there, and you do still have like a decent amount of like airports and that kind of stuff, but at the same time it's like the infrastructure is not amazing. You're even more limited on internet and stuff like that, and I don't know, like trying to judge distance between different people is difficult. That was one of the things I liked about Japan, was just the bullet trains and stuff like that. Hey, you can just like go from one end of the country and another to another in like a day, just because you're traveling 300 kilometers an hour. But yeah, I don't know. Millennials are just conditioned to accept this at this point. I don't want to turn it into one of those boomer rants, but I'm reading more and more articles about just like, yeah, we're just screwed, and whatever, fine. We'll deal with it. Yeah, is there anything positive to talk about this podcast, Will? That's not your fault. That's both of our faults.
Sure, there's a lot.
How's I guess Kingdom Hearts is done? Question mark? For you?
Well, no.
It's never done. It's never
there's
done.
There's still a lot done. There's still a lot left. Yeah.
Cool.
But I'm gonna be taking a break from it this week. Well, for one, my air conditioner broke.
Oh, God. That's a tragedy.
If there's any noise, that's what you're hearing is my desk fan, my mini desk fan, just doing its best to keep everything alive.
We're cheering on that desk fan
because of that. Yeah. So because of that, my stream's been a bit down for a couple days, but I'm actually taking a break from Kingdom Hearts this week to finally get to The Last of Us 2. We talked about it briefly last week. Hopefully we can revisit it once I'm done with it to talk about like expressions within video games and things like that. Because you're going through Death Stranding, so I think it will be two good games to kind of use
compare,
as that
contrast.
Discussion. But yeah, so looking forward to that. Otherwise, I've been checking out the like new event in League of Legends.
Nice.
Which is like the Spirit Blossom event, which. So I mean, at a certain point, I guess this became the norm, right? I mean, I knew it because I've actually bought the. I mean, I guess it's I don't think they call it a battle pass, but like the pass for the League of Legends events where you get challenges and you get tokens. And you can buy like champion shards or whatever to unlock more content. But
event pass, yes, spring like Spirit Blossom event pass.
So that's like the. Like there's just always one of them going on nonstop. I just realized at a certain point I was like, oh, there's like always an event pass.
Yeah.
Like there's almost rarely downtime, right? It's like one event after another. But then some of them are bigger than others because they're like focused around like champion releases, and that's like this one, right? It's there's like 2 champions being released during this event period, and then like a whole line of skins and like an epic skin and whatever. So. I mean, that's cool. It's cool that people are rallying around it. The new champions, I mean, she's fun. I don't think she'll see any like professional play, but for most people that doesn't matter. But I guess the big deal, like even for Reddit and whatnot, was the main bit about this.
I'm looking at it right now.
Like a visual novel,
Spirit Bonds, and it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
I understand where you took that from.
Yeah, I mean it was weird because I like logged in, and the client like turned into a visual novel, and it was like the Spirit Fox, and they were talking, and I'm assuming the dialogue choices are like relatively similar across all languages in terms of like tone, but so just in case it's not, because I haven't played it on the NA server in English. On the Korean server in Korean, one of the initial dialogue choices is basically that the Spirit Fox is like, you're like not supposed to know where you are or whatever. The Spirit Fox is like telling you what's going on, and then like the third dialogue choice is like, "Am I falling in love with you?" And I was like,
"Oh
okay.
no!"
Are we really like?
Yeah.
We're just diving right in
Yeah. Because
to this world. So I was like, well, that's funky.
Well, I'm looking at the presentation of it, and like you said, it is very visual novelty. And I think what Riot's been doing over the last like 2 years is, whenever Riot had that big meeting that said, "Hey, do you want to just like not dominate one genre of video games? You want to just dominate like all of them?" There had to be like one big meeting where they were like, "All right, we have a ton of money, we have a ton of goodwill. Do you want to try to take market share away from genres that we have no business being in?" And I'm saying this is like, the context of the company whenever they made this decision had to be a couple of years ago. And that's how they made the decision to do like Project L, which is their like fighting game, and then, Team Fight Tactics and Heroes of whatever, not Heroes, Legends of Runeterra and Valorant. There had to be a meeting where they were like, okay, we've dominated the MOBA space. We have a lot of goodwill. We have a lot of money in the bank. Do you want to try to take the same market share that we have in League with everything else? And
I think that's a little cynical.
That's a little
Valorant,
romanticized.
Valorant, like, yeah, because like even off the bat, Valorant was very adamant about not meaning to be a mass player base, right? It wasn't meant to be for the mass. It was meant to be for competitive. Whether that's going through well or not is a different discussion. But like,
I've never,
that Valorant, like their whole marketing was. Yeah, well, Valorant's whole marketing was about like interviews with the anti-cheat developers and like showing the coding of their servers and it was very, very focused. I mean, yeah, they had like the closer to the release, they had the like quick cinematics and that that was like all over Twitch and that was cool. But I think Valorant and I think one of the very first interviews they were like, hey, like this is meant for competitive players. Like they just straight up said that, right? And so I don't think they had any intention of it. Like I don't think the goal or the success was being measured in does it dominate the market, but more so and this is a different discussion, and this I don't know, but maybe there was a discussion for does it dominate the esport of FPSs, but I don't think in terms of player bases that would have been the same. For the other games, I mean, we really can't say for the ones that aren't released, right? I would say TFT is probably the closest one where that was probably the goal, but also I think it was pretty haphazard, as was everyone's auto chess game at the time. So that's one thing. Legends of Runeterra is, I think, one of the weird ones where my guess is that that's gone through so many iterations during development. Is my bet, because
we've heard about that game for years.
A card game that
we've heard about that Riot card game for years. So like My point with that,
I mean, I think it's more a matter of like if they, I think the discussion probably was, do we want to create another MOBA like a sequel, or do we want to do other stuff, right? And I think I do agree that the smart choice was to not create another MOBA, right?
Totally.
Or a sequel, and just go with other games.
My point with that is less so like to look at it. I don't know, with how I view Riot and how I view a lot of not just games as a service but software as a service in general, is they want to keep you within their ecosystem as much as possible. It's the same thing with Marvel, it's the same thing with Netflix, it's the same thing with Disney in general, DreamWorks, whatever. They want to be able to keep you within their ecosystem and not have you leave their ecosystem, because if you leave their ecosystem, you start putting less of yourself attached to that product and that brand. And when you do that, you have less loyalty, and you also have less likelihood to buy whatever new project or product or engage with whatever new thing that they're putting out. And that was why I was really surprised that Valorant wasn't set in the League of Legends universe. I really expected it to be, because I thought that Riot were just going to go like whole hog on not League of Legends as a game, but League of Legends as a setting. And I don't know if you remember, but they really changed the lore a couple years ago, where when I started playing League of Legends, the lore of it was that all the characters in League of Legends were literally part of a League of Legends where that's how they were settling settling like conflicts between countries, was that all these characters were contracted essentially to this organization that used them as pawns or characters in order to settle disputes. And eventually they were like, well, that's not sustainable. It's becoming harder and harder to explain why these like godlike beings are being wrangled into service by this overarching organization. So they changed the lore and basically said, okay, none of this like proxy war shit. Let's just have them all be legit characters in their own settings. And with that came a very big, like, greater focus of lore, and that bled over to a lot of their different games. And the visual novel thing does not surprise me whatsoever, because it's the same. They're learning from gacha, where gacha games have their
So
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. I just want, before you go further, I just want to say one thing that, so I was afraid that the visual novel was going to be a big part of this event,
but it isn't.
It actually isn't.
That's good.
You can actually just skip all of it. Like I have been. I will just say that
This ain't my jam.
Like, ever since I realized I can just skip it and it doesn't affect any of my rewards, you can just skip it. You do still have to click like skip dialogue to get your rewards, but like that's not a big deal, right? So that you're still brought to that screen where you have to like select who to talk to and even that, like, it's basically like you said in the beginning, it's just very much in the style, like presentation style of visual novel. But for instance, like in the beginning I was like confused, because I was like, okay, so if I choose to talk to, like, say Riven, who's one of the characters featured because she has one of the Spirit Blossom skins, it's like, okay, so then am I like blocked from
other things,
talking to the other characters? And does that mean like I have different challenges? And I was like, no, like they're like, all of their challenges are, as long as you've clicked on them all at least once to start the conversation, like all those challenges are going on at the same time. And so you can basically, depending, well, because some of them, for instance, like some of them are like have a high score in crowd control, and it's like, okay, well, certain champions just like can't do that, so that you might have a problem with. But if you select your game type, mode, or champions in a way, you can like constantly level up the quest for every character simultaneously, and then you also like don't have to care about which dialogue choice you're using. But on the flip side, like you said, it is clearly and I would say this is one of those weird ones where it's like lore for the skins, right? More so than the characters, because this is all revolved around like Spirit Blossom skins, like even for the champions being released during this event. But I think it's just going to show that like they're committed to storytelling in the future, and probably has to do with, more of like they're supporting and publishing the indie games in the future that are coming out with single player, actual like story based adventures. Obviously, like we said, Legends of Runeterra they're trying to put more lore into it with different cards and different characters being introduced. In the future, the action RPG will probably have a lot of story. So yeah, there's definitely a shift in focus. The visual novel thing, I think, was more of just a like I probably also just a good litmus test of like, does this work for our fan base, right?
Well,
whereas it's not crucial, right? So I don't feel like I'm forced to take part in it. But if I'm a fan of visual novels in League of Legends, would I go through and click through on all this? I'm sure they can track that.
Well, League of Legends has always been very tied towards, even though it's an American game, it's always been very tied to Asian culture, I would argue. I don't think there's any kind of real dispute about that, I guess. Between its esports and like just its aesthetic, it's very tied to Korean culture, very tied to anime, very tied to folklore, that kind of stuff. I think the thing that League of Legends has always blown the water out of Dota with is that it's made reasons for people to play that aren't good at the game, and they've designed certain champions that don't require a lot of skill, and their main goal for those champions is to provide the worst person in a group of friends the impetus in order to play the game, or like the motivation to play the game, where they do not, as developers, they don't want that one friend to feel very left out. And because of that, they've also enabled people who aren't good at the game ways of participating in it that still make them feel rewarded for doing so and make them feel attached to the League of Legends ecosystem, to bring it back around to what I was talking about before. League and Riot and all that have always done really good jobs of engaging community, encouraging cosplaying, encouraging fan works. And I've said before, I think on this podcast, that demographically, the people that are going to be doing those cosplay and fan works and creative aspects of it are women. And giving people ways of participating in those kind of things and allowing a whole demographic, they're trying to satisfy all demographics at once, essentially, by doing a lot of these little things that let people participate. And Dota has not, like, you know, both of us have a lot of experience with Dota, and like every once in a while Dota will put out a comic or a cinematic or something like that. But in terms of, and you know, they'll do a cosplay competition at TI or something like that. But in terms of like spotlighting people, or in terms of giving people different reasons to play, Riot blows them out of the water completely. And this visual novel thing, like I said, is very much influenced by gacha games. It's very influenced by a lot of indie visual novels, like light novels, that kind of culture. And like you said, it doesn't dominate it. It doesn't mean that everyone has to participate, because if they made it mandatory for everyone, they would probably get I don't want to say some kind of player revolt, because that sounds very drastic. But at the same time, it's giving people who don't necessarily like playing the game, but like playing the game for their friends, it gives them something to interact with. And like you said, it makes them feel rewarded by investing into that ecosystem. If they really like Ari as a character, there's a way to get a pseudo, you know, romantic relationship through this visual novel, even though it's like tongue-in-cheek. It's the same thing with gacha games, where if you really like one character and they throw out a new super rare, you're going to spend your rolls or spend money or whatever in order to try to get that one PNG of the character, just because they have some new lines, or it teases you as a player with a relationship or something like that. So basically, like, Riot are very good at throwing these little, identifying what's effective about all these other little smaller game fandoms and that kind of stuff. And maybe that's the wrong wording, because gacha gaming is not small by any means. But like I said, they want to keep you within the ecosystem. They do not want you to they do not want you to find the same satisfaction that you get from this visual novel somewhere else, because that might mean you leave their ecosystem, and that might mean you spend less time and less money into their game. So because they have such a big lead, because they have such a big like money and developer, like they have so many employees worldwide. Riot has so many employees, so many artists, so many designers, and employing those people to create extra lore for the card game, or for this, or for fan fiction, or whatever. I don't even know. I don't think it's called fan fiction because it's first party. It's owned by the actual company, so it isn't fan fiction, but it's extra fiction, you know. It's the network effect. It's the reason why you can't get people to leave Facebook, you know. I've spent enough time on this, or I'm so invested into my friends playing this game, or I'm so invested into the money that I've spent on skins or the character that I really like, that I don't want to leave. And Riot realized, thankfully, that they can't just sit on their laurels with that. They actually have to keep producing things. And because they have such a big budget and such a big employee talent base, they can do that. They can say, okay, well, fighting games is going to be a huge loss leader for us. You know, like this Project L, whatever, fighting games do not make a lot of money and do not have a ton of people playing. You know, like Tekken 7 is the highest played fighting game on Steam right now, and it only has like 3,000 people playing online at the same time. Even Street Fighter 5 does not have like more than 5,000 people playing at the same time. They are definitely not going to be able to make like a worldwide sensation out of their League of Legends fighting game. But if they can make one where they can steal all the Street Fighter 5 players who look at Street Fighter and say, that's the big fighting game, that's the most popular fighting game of that kind, I want to play it because that's how I'm going to get the most matches, and that's what's most popular. If they release a League fighting game where all the people who already play League go, oh, I was going to play Street Fighter V, but I can play Project L instead because it has the characters I already know. It gives me bonuses to play League of Legends. Maybe there's some crossover events. Maybe there's skins for a character I already like. Hey, I did this visual novel event with Ari all the way through. Oh, wait, Ari's in Project L? Hell yeah, I'm there. It keeps people within the Riot ecosystem. It keeps them from leaving to explore other companies. It keeps them locked, essentially, and those customers are the ones that are going to be generational customers. They are going to be the ones that spend money over decades of time on the same product, and that's almost what every brand in the world is wanting to do right now. It's just that they have varying levels of budget, they have varying levels of talent bandwidth, that kind of stuff, and Riot is just like, hell yeah, we can produce 4 bomb games if we want, like the card game, the auto chess, the fighting game, Valorant, whatever. They can just be like, yeah, we can produce 4 absolute bombs that only give us maybe like a 10th of the audience that League of Legends does, and it'll still be worth it because those 10th, like that size of audience isn't going to anyone else. Those Valorant players, like you were saying, all the Valorant marketing is focused on the hardcore technical aspects of it because that's what it takes to steal people away from CSGO. Because all the people dissatisfied with CSGO, the main things that I hear about it are tick rate on the servers and hackers. So like being able to focus all of your marketing on, your servers and hackers, and then either the main one I remember is when they were explaining that smoke grenades don't seeing things through smoke grenades, the whatever's on the other side of a smoke grenade doesn't get transferred to you at a server level. So even if you had like a hack to see through everything in the map, you would not be able to see through smokes because that information isn't transferred to you. I could be quoting that wrong, but the only reason that they would focus so hard on their marketing of that is because they thought it mattered. They would not focus on that messaging if they thought that a casual audience wouldn't care about it. They realized that in order to have advocates for Valorant, they need to go to the competitive hardcore scene because those are the people that influence people to play the game. So if you aren't going to satisfy those people, you aren't going to get casuals. So you have to, like, everything that Riot does.
I don't know if that is true.
I don't know. That's what my instincts tell me.
More so about the actual ideology rather than whether Riot meant that or not. I don't know if you have to necessarily
for a genre like that.
And yeah, well, yeah, because here's the thing. Well, I guess it also depends on your definition of a casual in a tactical shooter to begin with, right? Because like a tactical shooter in and of itself is not going to draw your typical like mobile gaming gacha player. Whereas League of Legends could, right? So there is also that distinction of like when we say casual, like tactical FPS player, do we mean like within that standard of like tactical FPS players and they're a bit more casual, or do we mean like casual gamers in general, right? Whereas League, I would say, has a wide enough variety of players from like pretty casual to obviously very hardcore and competitive. But I mean, this is a different discussion. But totally. I am just not I am a pretty big advocate of. I think esports people continue to live in a big bubble, or not. Well, I say bubble not in a business sense, but of our own social bubble, where we think like, oh, like if I don't get a professional player to vouch for my game, it's doomed.
Oh yeah,
and it's like no, it helps a lot. And I would say. But for instance, I would say it's more so streamers and influencers rather than professional players. It just so happens that for certain game genres that the top competitive players are also some of the top streamers, right? But I would say that probably matters a decent amount. But even that is more, it's more just to jumpstart amidst all the saturation of games that we have these days. So I think that's what it affects rather than I'm now playing this because like so-and-so is playing it. I think it's more I'm now playing this because I heard it from so-and-so and I didn't hear about other games. But I would say for competitive games, it's a little different, right? I think for competitive games, at the end of the day, like people, like gamers are pretty stubborn about their own standards, right? And I think for competitive play, like the only ones that are really going to be affected by, say, the CSGO, people talking, say, goodwill about Valorant, are probably a pretty small minority in the grand scheme of things.
I think that on a game launch, especially a game launch that comes from a very large company where there are equally an amount of people that want the game to fail for an entertainment perspective, where they're just like, yeah, F Riot, we want this game to fail. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Riot released Valorant and all you saw was all these errors about server tick rate and like, oh, there's all these GIFs on Twitter about like what the bullet spray looks like and blah, blah, blah.
To be fair, it's backfiring a bit already, right?
Yes.
With Vanguard, being questionable and things like that.
But I'm more just saying is that like gamers in general will, I see this a lot with Dota and almost with every competitive game where if there's a reason to write the game off for things that would never affect you as a player, people will still do it, especially if they have a reason to like spite the company.
So where do you see this though, right? Because I have a counterpoint in a different game that isn't known as a competitive game.
Okay.
Like where are you seeing those types of actions, right? Because here's my counterpoint. Games like FIFA get bashed on all the time.
Yeah.
In core gaming communities for their business models.
Yeah.
And yet, like the majority of people probably don't even know that the game is being bashed on. They're just playing and spending money on it.
I get what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying.
The community that we are accustomed to is a continuous, and for certain games it's different, right? Certain games it's like, that is the community, right? And that it kind of just lives that way. But I would say even for League, which I would say is one of the few games where, because of Riot's own support of the subreddit, like the Reddit has now become the kind of like main community. Of course. Even for that, even for League, I would say that's still not necessarily a majority.
Here's my methodology with this, or here's where I'm, I get what you're saying. I'm more just saying for me, Riot are not trying to make Valorant customers. Riot are trying to make Riot customers. They are trying to make people who are, again, going back to the ecosystem thing, they, in their research for how to market this game, either through experimentation or through like an actual cognizant decision, made the decision to market it based on a competitive aspect. Either they sat around a table and said, okay, well, we have a chance to see how well this works. We can put out a giant thing that focuses on the technical aspect of the game and try to influence all the competitive players, and we're seeing all the people that couldn't make a living, or well, this is going to sound very cruel the way I'm wording it, but I'll explain. Couldn't make a living at CSGO, or there wasn't enough room at the top of CSGO for them to make a decent amount of money. They're just going to Valorant and becoming Valorant pros instead. A lot of the people that I'm seeing, the names that I'm seeing, when I see Valorant highlights from teams or whatever, they're CSGO pros, but Riot had to have a meeting where they sat down and said, well, let's see, there's two ways of going about this. There's either let's just do it and see what happens and measure it. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll just fall back on Overwatch-esque marketing, where we just focus on the characters and focus on the back lore, and because that worked with League of Legends, and we know that we can make it work again. Or they literally had a conversation where it says the only way that this game will work is if that we try to steal people away from CSGO by addressing all the points that people really dislike about CSGO, and that'll get us the pros and that'll get us the streamers, and then people will follow those people because they don't know enough about the game in order to make their own decisions about whether those things matter or not. I probably will never actually play CSGO or an FPS at a level where 64 versus 128 tick rate matters to me, and the majority of people probably won't either. It's like playing Face It rather than matchmaking. It's like people don't necessarily need that level of like paid matchmaking and rewards and stuff like that, but they'll play it because they think that it makes them more pro, or they'll play it or use that service because the pros do, and I want to be like a pro. I'll complain about tick rate on the servers when the thing I'm complaining about was not influenced by tick rate whatsoever, but I've heard the term tick rate, and I know it's a bad thing, and I know like it's with Rainbow Six Siege. Oh, bullet variants. That became like a buzzword for a while because people were just like, oh, the bullet variant sucks, the randomization of the bullets, and it's just like, this probably didn't matter to you at all. You just heard pros parroting it, So I don't know. I'm trying to put my...
I think my counterpoint is not to any of your separate points. Like, I agree Riot is clearly trying to keep people within their own universe, right? I agree that they marketed to competitive players, like whether it's pros or not, like competitive minded players when it comes to Valorant. But I don't think for Valorant specifically, the idea was, okay, we will market to competitive players so that we can dominate that marketplace. I don't think they ever imagined it'd be great if they could, but I don't.
I get what you're saying.
I would say if they had a meeting where they were like, hey, we're going to take over CSGO, I would say they were incredibly not well prepared about the market at all. Because
I understand what you're saying.
Because while what you're saying is true, because I just don't think those two are necessarily correlated. I think those two are true points on their own. But because then again, going back to something you brought up earlier is like, but then Valorant also wasn't league characters, and then something I've been meaning to bring up in this podcast is also, if you haven't noticed, Legends of Runeterra and Valorant are both separate clients. So if and part of this I'm sure is just because the client is really bad for League of Legends.
Yes, it is terrible.
But I'm sure that's actually a very big part. I'm sure if it was actually better coded, they might have wanted to try to figure out a way where they could. But other than TFT, like these are now all broken up where like, I can see my friends on that friend list, but like, boy, oh boy, am I not going to care because I'm going to have to open up another client if I want to play a game with them. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I'll just message them in Discord. Like, how is that any different?
If I could go back half an hour and use the different wording and not say dominate those areas, but leech into those areas. Maybe that was a better...
Sure.
Like, maybe leech has a negative connotation or whatever, but you don't just come into an area and then immediately unseat the previous top of the hill, so to speak. You have to wear away at that position over time, and you have to compromise its monopoly over and over and disrupt. Like it's how what you would say about the tech industry when things disrupt industries like Uber and whatever. Uber didn't just like come in and just completely blow up taxis. No, they undermined it over time, and same with Airbnb and food deliveries and stuff like that. They didn't just come in, dominate it all at once, but you have to chip away at them until you're able to flex what your advantage is. And with Riot, it's bandwidth, it's money, and it's time, and it's talent from its artists and that kind of stuff. With Uber and with delivery apps and that kind of stuff, it's convenience, and it's the tech aspect of it, and it's having every restaurant that you want, in that app ecosystem. So I chose a poor wording in terms of dominating, but I definitely think there was a meeting where they were like, you know what? We have the money to mess around and fail. If we want to eventually,
100%.
get
that's
into...
why it happened now instead of like 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why I'm like coming back originally to the Spirit Blossom thing. Riot have the ability to go to their, like, there was a meeting where they just said, what can we do in order to make this event more fun to people who aren't good at League of Legends? How do we cash in, not cash in because that sounds really cynical, but it's like, how do we hit the audience that is like super weeby and love anime and love K-pop and love gacha games or indie visual novels or reading light novels or whatever? How do we hit that audience and give them a reason to play our game while not making it so mandatory that hardcore gamers are going to look at it and be like, God, they're really making me go through a visual novel in order to get the skins I want? You know, like Riot's ability in order to have the bandwidth of creation, to have the developer resources to do all those little things just to keep people within their ecosystem rather than making them so mandatory because, hey, we put a lot of money into this. They can afford to have this only interacted with by like 10% of their fan base or whatever. But that 10% usually is the same demographic as people who are making fan works, making art, making cosplay. And those are all the people that are doing their marketing for free for them. So being able to engage all those different demographics means that they are keeping their advantage rolling. They are keeping the advantage that's let them build this giant lead. They aren't sitting on their laurels. If they were sitting on their laurels, they'd make the same event year after year after year. And that's Dota. Dota makes the same event year after year after year, except for this year. They actually seem to... I'm very pleased with Aghanim's Labyrinth. They seem to have put some work into it. But if they didn't put that in there, I would have the exact same feelings as this year's Battle Pass with Dota, where it's you got a lead, now you're sitting on your laurels, and you're not innovating, and you're not keeping your lead through the things that were strong in the first place. You're getting lazy. And as many people hate Riot, as many people hate League of Legends or hate the fan base or ecosystem or whatever they're trying to do, you got to at least respect that they're not just sitting on it. They're realizing what's hot right now. They're realizing what's successful in gaming in general, and they're saying, don't leave our ecosystem in order to get that same feeling. We're going to make something special and weird, but it's going to hit all those things that you like out of that mobile gacha game. Stay within our ecosystem. Stay within our ecosystem. And that takes a lot of like intuition, and it takes a lot of trust to be able to do. So I don't know. I think that's a good place to end things, at least in terms of the discussion. I haven't touched League of Legends in like years. I booted up. I played like one game of Nasus because I know I can last hit with him, and then I let it go for another year or two. So that's where I stand on League of Legends.
I love it.
But you got to pay attention to Riot at least. Will, what are you up to this week on the internet besides melting because of no air conditioning?
Yeah, hopefully that gets fixed ASAP. I was supposed to get an update from my landlord like by this podcast recording, but I have not, so that's concerning. But anyway, what am I doing? I will be streaming still, maybe just for not as long given the heat, but I'll be streaming most evenings. Korea time is usually when I stream, so you can catch me then. On twitch.tv/willchobra, so that's WILLCHOBRA, same ID as my Twitter, which is usually most of my like content updates, etc. I post on Discord, which you can find through my Twitch and Twitter. My Twitter is more for me to like chime in onto other discussions or news that pops up. But yeah, on stream I'll be playing The Last of Us 2, so if you haven't caught up to it, or I know there was some controversy about the story, so if you're interested in my reactions, you'll be able to catch it live on stream. And then every day we've been kind of kicking off each day with some roguelikes, so just started Neon Abyss. That's a new one that came out about 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
Pretty cool. That's about it. Oh, and of course I have a weekly show with T1 called Week of Legends, where we talk about like LCK stuff.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of clips of that. Anyway, I've been seing you eating noodles. That's the thing I remember most from seeing your Twitter clips of it. Anyway, but yeah, no, I'm glad things are kind of going well, and I hope your air conditioning gets fixed, because like, especially as we were talking about spending money on apartments and stuff like that, that's like boomer Matt talking, where I'm like, I need air conditioning now. I can't live without air conditioning anymore. For me, you can find me on most things with Matt Demers, or under the username Matt Demers, MATTDEMERS. If you want to see all my links at once, you can check out mattd.cc as a URL, and you'll see all that other stuff. I have been kind of quiet on the creating aspects lately. I've been trying to like figure that out, and also, like I said, I've been kind of dealing with some health stuff that is taking my time. But I appreciate you bringing up that deal with the Kingdom Hearts thing, because apparently like Kingdom Hearts 3, well, like I said, I think I've brought this up before, where in Canada full price like new games are like $79.99. That comes out to like $90, and seeing like the complete Kingdom Hearts for like $40 my currency, I'm like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways, other than that, I am just keeping on, playing some Death Stranding, not really doing any streaming or anything like that, but just writing here and there. But yeah, I think that's it. gmncast.com for previous episodes of our podcast. You can check out reddit.com/r/gmncast for episode threads where we invite you to throw your feedback and that kind of stuff. I think that's pretty much it for this week. I got to fix my camera because now I don't just use it for streaming, I use it for work meetings too, so it not working is actually a bit of a big deal. But well, I hope you have a good night.
And I hope you have a good morning, Matt.
Perfect. We will see you guys next week.